We're holding Sotah Daf Gimel and Beis, the second to last line, Tana Rabbanan. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a Braisa, Ezuhi Edus Rishena Harishena. What is considered the first testimony? Zu Edus Sesida, this is the testimony of the seclusion. When Edim come and testify that they saw the woman seclude with this man, that is Edus Harishena. Edus Achrena, what is Edus Achrena? Zu Edus Tuma, this is the Edus, this is the testimony when Edim are testifying that they saw the woman being mezana. Turn over to Daf Daled Amud Aleph. Asks the Gemara, the Kama Shir Sesira, what is the, you're saying that Edus Rishena is the time of Sesira. So the question is, the Kama Shir Sesira, how much is the time of Sesira? So the Gemara says, Kidei Tuma, this is the time it takes for a woman to be metama, to defile herself. How much is Kidei Tuma? Kidei Bia, the time it takes for Bia. Like Rashi says, this is the time of Neshikas Aver. How much is Kidei Bia? Kidei Ha'ara, this is the time, the beginning of the Bia. How much is Kidei Ha'ara? Kidei Akafas Dekel, the time it takes for someone to circle a palm tree. And the Gemara is going to explain later on why use these expressions. K'dei tuma, k'dei bia, k'dei hara, k'dei akafas dekel. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, these are the words of Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Eliezer says that the time of Shir Sesida is k'dei mezigas hakois, the time it takes to dilute wine. In the olden days, the wine was very strong, and one needed to dilute the wine with water. That took time. So however long it takes from mezigas hakois, that's how long Shir Sesida is. Rabbi Yeshua says, we're going to bring now 9 different opinions. Rabbi Yeshua says, Kidei lishtoisai, this is the time it takes to drink wine. Ben Azzai says, Kidei litzleis beitza, the time it takes to roast an egg. Rabbi Akiva says, Kidei legoima, it's the time it takes to swallow an egg. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira says, the time it takes, the time it takes to swallow, when the egg is a little bit liquid, the time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, this is the time the Kidei Shir Sesida is. Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyah says, Kidei Liksher Gardi Nima, the time it takes for a weaver to tie 2 knots together, that's how long the Shir Sesida is. Chanan ben Pinchas says, Kidei Shetoishit Yada L'Teichpia Litel Kesem, is the time it takes for a woman to actually, she has a splinter, something stuck in her, like a toothpick stuck in her teeth, and women, like the Mefarshim explain, are much quicker at taking out something stuck in their teeth than men are. So however long it takes for a woman to take out the kesem, this toothpick stuck in her teeth, that's how long this Shir Sesida is. Playmay says, Kidei Sheteshit Yada L'Sal Litel Kikar, the time it takes for a woman to take bread out of a basket, which is very, very short. And the Brisa says, Afal Bi She'en Raya L'Davar, even though there's no Raya from this pasuk, Zeich L'Davar, you can learn a Zeicher. Pasuk in Mishlei says, Ki Ba'ad Isha Zayna Ad Kikar Lechem, which we see the pasuk puts the Zayna, the one who is being Mizana, with Lechem. So from here he brings out a Zeicher that this woman who's equated to Azayna has a shaykhis to Lechem. Okay, that's what the first Brisa says. Frag the Gemara, V'chol Hani Lamali. Why does the Brisa have to bring all these different shiurim? It says Kama Shir Sesida. It's very ambiguous. Kidei Tuma, Kidei Bia, Kidei Hara, Kidei Akafas Dekel. Just say clearly, Kidei Akafas Dekel. So the Gemara says like this: Tzricha, the Brisa needed to say that the time of Sesida is number 1, Kidei Tuma, Kidei Bia, Kidei Hara, Kidei Akafas Dekel. Why? To eat Tana Kidei Tuma, if the Brisa would have just said that the time of Sesida is Kidei Tuma, Hava Mina, I would have said Kidei Tumasa V'Artzusa. It's the time it takes her to be defiled and to consent to this relationship, to this bia. Kamash Malon. Therefore, the Brisa teaches us that how much is Kedei Tuma is Kedei Bia, only the time it takes for the actual Bia. Just to point out, the first Taisvis, if you look on Kamashir Sasira, Taisvis brings you Yerushalmi, that all these shiurim are without the time for the removement of the clothes. Back to our Gemara, V'itana Kedei Bia. If the Brisa would have just said the words Kedei Bia, Hava Mina, I would have said Kedei Gemar Bia, the time it takes for the completion of the Bia. Kamash Malan. Therefore, the Brisa uses the third expression, or the third expression, Kedei Ha'ara, the time, like Rashi says, the Neshika Se'ever, the beginning of the Bia. V'yashmina Kedei Ha'ara, and if the Brisa would have only said the words Kedei Ha'ara, I would think Havamina Kedei Ha'ara V'artzusa. It's the time of the beginning of the Bia and the time that she consents. Kamash Malan. Therefore, it tells us Kedei Tuma, Kedei Tuma. The Kama Kedei Ha'ara, and how much is that? How much is, some of the first want to take out the Ha'ara, the Kama Kedei HaKofas Dekel, this is the time of Kedei HaKofas Dekel. The Ma'aser Rashi asks, why doesn't the Gemara just say clearly, if that's the Maskana, why not just say clearly Kedei HaKofas Dekel? So Rashi brings down, which also needs clarification what exactly that means, but without all these expressions, I wouldn't really necessarily know the Bia part. Okay, now the Gemara brings a second Brisa, which the Gemara is going to ask a few questions how this Brisa, the first Brisa and the second Brisa, contradict each other. So the Gemara says, I'm going to ask you a shaila from this Brisa to the previous Brisa that you quoted. The Torah says in Parsha Sota, V'nistara, and she concealed herself. The Brisa says, V'kama shir sasida, how much is the time of sasida? The Brisa says, Lo shamanu, from the pasuk of V'nistara, I don't know how much this shir sasida is. Kishu oimer v'ni nitma. However, when the Torah says v'hi nitma, hava oimer, I would say that the time of sasida is Kedei Tuma, which is Kedei Bia, Kedei Ha'ara. Which, how long is that? Kedei Chazaras Dekel, the time it takes, and like this, for now, the Gemara thinks that Chazaras Dekel and the Hakafas Dekel is the same thing, which means the time that it takes to basically go around a palm tree. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. Second opinion, Rabbi Shua says, Kedei Mezigas HaKois, the time it takes to dilute wine. Ben Azzai, third opinion, Kedei L'shtei, in order, the time it takes to drink the wine. Rabbi Kiva Eimer, Kedei Litzos Beitza, the time it takes to roast the egg. Rabbi Yehuda ben Pseira Eimer, Rabbi Yehuda ben Pseira says, Kedei L'goymer, the time it takes to actually swallow the egg. The Gemara says, Kosolka Daitin, now we think, from the way we read the Brisa, Hainu HaKofas Dekel, Hainu Chazaras Dekel, that when the first Brisa says that according to Rabbi Yishmael, Hakofas Dekel and Chazaras Dekel is exactly the same thing. So now the Gemara asks a stira. Hassam, in the first Brisa, Rabbi Shmuel says, Kedei HaKofas Dekel, he says that what's the time of Kedei Sesira is the time it takes for one to actually circle a palm tree. Rabbi Eliezer Alei, and in that Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer argues right away on Rabbi Yishmael, Hacha over here in the second Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer says that how much is the Kedei Sesira, Kedei Chazaras Dekel, which is the time of Chazaras Dekel. So, l'cha'ira, it's a stira. In the first Brisa, Rabbi Shmuel says Hakofas Dekel, and Rabbi Eliezer says it's Mezigas HaKois, which if Rabbi Eliezer is arguing on Rabbi Shmuel, obviously he holds that the time is not Hakofas Dekel. Yet, in the second Brisa, he says that how much is Kedei Sesira is Chazaras Dekel. And we think now that Chazaras Dekel and Hakofas Dekel is the same thing. So, Abaye answers, no, it's not the same thing. Hakofa, in the first Brisa, when it says Hakofas Dekel, that's beregel. That's when somebody goes with his feet, and goes around the palm tree. Chazara, when we say Chazaras Dekel in the second Brisa, that's talking about totally something else. That's beruach. That's with the wind. When the palm tree sways back and forth, so that takes a little bit longer. And that's what it means. Chazaras Dekel means that when the palm tree sways back and forth. So now, boy, Rav Ashi now gets very nitty-gritty, and he says, when he says Chazara Beruach, when Abaye explains that according to Rabbi Eliezer, his opinion is Chazara Beruach, so what does that mean? Does that mean ki heiche the ozol v'hadar asi? Is that the time that takes for a palm tree to just go once, sway back and forth one time? Or no. Or maybe it takes, you go to Florida, it's very windy over there, and you have a palm tree swaying back and forth. It could take a minute or even more for it to settle back to its original spot. So the Gemara says, Teiku always means Tishbi Yitaris Kushis V'Yiboyis, which means that we're going to have this answer only when Mashiach comes. And like the Rishonim, the Ran, famous Ran, says that always when the Gemara says Teiku, we always go L'Chumra. We always go, especially Midiraisa, we always go L'Chumra, and we take the more stricter opinion. Okay, now the Gemara asks a second question. Hassam, in the first price, Rabbi Eliezer said, Kedei Mizigas Kois, that how much is the Kedei Sesira Kedei of Mizigas HaKois? And Hacha, in the second brisa, what did the brisa say? What did he say? Kedei Chazaras Dekel. It's the time of Chazaras Dekel. So is it Mizigas HaKois or is it Chazaras Dekel? So the Gemara says, Idi Chad Shiuru. Really, Mizigas HaKois, the time it takes to dilute wine, and the time it takes for the Chazaras Dekel to sway back and forth, that's really one shear. Third question, Hassam, in the first brisa, Rabbi Yeshua says, Kedei L'Shtoisoi, it's the time it takes to drink this diluted wine. And Hacha, in the second brisa, Rabbi Yeshua says, Kedei Mizigas HaKois, the time it takes to dilute the wine. So is it Kedei L'Shtoisoi, or is it Kedei Mizigas HaKois? So the Gemara says, Eimer say that really the two brises is Kedei Limzoig V'Lishtois. You have to read that both prices really mean the time it takes limzoig to dilute and to drink. Why don't you just say simply, like beforehand, that it's all one shear? So Imkain, if so, the Gemara says, Hainu Rabbi Eliezer, will come out that if you say that it's one shear, it will come out that it's the same opinion as Rabbi Eliezer, that it's Mizigas HaKois. So therefore you have to say Mizigas HaKois V'Lishtoisei. Okay, fourth question, fourth stira, Hassam, in the first brisa, Omer Ben Azzai says, Kedei Litzlis Beitza, it's the time it takes to roast an egg. And Hacha, in the second brisa, Omar, Rabbi Ben Azzai says, Kedei L'Shtoisei, the time it takes to drink the diluted wine. So my answer is, Idi Chad Shiuruhu, Be'emes, it's really one shear. Fifth question, Hassam, in the first brisa, Rabbi Akiva said, Kedei L'Goyma is the time it takes to swallow, and Hacha Amar Kedei Litzlis Beitza is the time it takes to roast an egg. Agav, the Mefarshim point out that even though Rabbi Akiva was Ben Azzai's teacher, the reason why the brisa brings down Ben Azzai before Rabbi Akiva is because before one actually swallows an egg, he has to roast an egg. But in a Chanami, if that would not be the case, then it would be befitting for the brisa to first put Rabbi Akiva's name, who was Ben Azzai's Rebbe. Back to the question. So Rabbi Akiva is being seiser himself. One place it says Kedei L'Goymai, and one place it says Kedei Litzos Beitza. So the Gemara says Ema, what you have to say, and the brisa says that Rabbi Akiva means Kedei Litzos Beitza, the time it takes to roast an egg, Vil L'Goyma, and to actually swallow it. Fred the Gemara again, why don't you just say that it's the same shear? So the Gemara says, Im Kain, if it's the same shear, if Rabbi Akiva is the same shear, the Hainu Ben Azzai, this will be the same shita as a student of Ben Azzai, and we know in the brisa Ben Azzai argues on his Rebbe. Sixth question, Hassam, in the first brisa, Rabbi Yehuda ben Mesedah says, it's the time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, one after another, and Hach, in the second brisa, Omar, Rabbi Yehuda ben Mesedah says, Kedei L'Goyma. So is it the time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, or the time it takes to swallow 1 egg? So the Gemara says no. Or Rabbi Yehuda ben Mesedah says, Kedei L'Goyma Shalish Beitzim, he's not saying his own shita, he's saying, L'dvara de Rabbi Akiva Kamer. He's saying, he's answering Rabbi Akiva, according to you, Rabbi Akiva, who says it's the time Kedei L'Goyma Shalish Beitzim, de Ka'amar, which you say that Misharin, Bitzliya Ubegimiya, that how do you be Mishar? How do you estimate the time of the tuma is the time it takes to roast it and to swallow it. Amar, so why not just say very simple? Why you have to go given all these funny expressions which is unclear? Just say shir gemia l'chuda. Just say the shir gemia l'chuda is kedei l'gmaya shalish beitzim zeh the hainu, which is the time of tzliya u gemia. Okay, now the Gemara brings another opinion. Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyah says, it's the time it takes to, we had this opinion, the seventh opinion, the Brisa said, the time it takes for a weaver to weave all the two knots together. So boy, Rav Ashi gets very technical. Are we talking about that these two strings are next to each other or far from each other? So Gemara says, Teiku. Chanan ben Pinchas says, it's the time it takes for a woman to take out a splinter from her teeth. Rav Ashi says, are we talking about that the toothpick is stuck in the teeth and therefore will take a longer time? Or are we talking about that the toothpick is not stuck in the tooth very strong and therefore will come out a lot quicker? My answer is again, Teiku. Playmate says, it's the time it takes for a woman to take out a bread from a basket. Rav Ashi says, does he mean that the bread is stuck to the basket, or are we talking about that the bread is not stuck to the basket, which will come out a lot quicker? Are we talking about a new basket or an old basket? Are we talking about hot, is the bread going to be hot or is it going to be cold? Are we talking about bread of wheat or bread of barley? And like Rashi says, bread of barley, bread of wheat is a lot. It's cholaf and ishmat yeshim mikol haseidim. It comes out very much quicker. Are we talking about that the bread is made from very thin flour, or is it made from very thick flour? My answer is Teiku. Okay, I know we learned a lot of shittas. We have over here Rabbi Yuzevich. He made on his WhatsApp chat, he made last year a beautiful chart to be mevar, just all the shittas. So Mirza Hashem, I'll post it after the share. I'll post what he made. Okay, back in the Gemara, we're holding the Haftalit Amid Aleph, Amid Beis, Amid Rabbi Yitzchak. Amid Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yisam, Amid Rabbi Yechon. He says, Kol echad ve'echad ba'atzmei shir, that all these different shiurim that the Tanaim gave, it's all based on their own experience. Frag the Gemara, Vayika ben Azzai d'lei nosif. Ben Azzai, we know, gave a shita, and like the Gemara in Yevamah said, that Ben Azzai never got married. The famous Gemara in Yevamah, Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis, Rashi quotes, Avo ma eseh shenafshi choshke b'teira. That Ben Azzai was so in love and so engrossed with Teda that he never got married. Now, if he never got married, and you're saying that everyone gave on his own experience, how does Ben Azzai know that? So the Gemara says, three answers. Either one answer is that Ben Azzai was married and then he got divorced. As was brought down in the Gemara in Yevamis, that Ben Azzai was married to the daughter of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva, we know Rabbi Akiva's wife sent him away, and he was away from for many, many years from his wife. So she learned this at home, and she also sent Ben Azzai away also to go learn Torah. And what happened was, when Ben Azzai, based on this Gemara, Ben Azzai came back, and he basically could not handle being married and learning Torah. He was so engrossed in love with Torah that he, based on this answer, he got divorced. Second answer, that's what is. Second answer, or another answer, you heard it from his Rav, Rabbi Akiva. Third answer is that Be'emes, by Atzadik, they have the Soid Hashem L'Reav, those who fear Hashem know the secrets, and because he was a big tzaddik, he knew how long it takes. Playmay, if you remember, brought down his shita, and he brought a pasuk, Ki ba'ad isha zeinat kikar lachem. So the Gemara says, Darish Rabbi Vida v'zimnin amar le'mishmei Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Vida darshan, sometimes Rabbi Vida said this in the name of Rabbi Ami, v'zimnin amar le'mishmei Rabbi Asi, and sometimes he said it in the name of Rabbi Asi. What did he say? Somebody who is going to eat bread without washing his hands beforehand, it's like having a relations with the Isha Zaina, like it says in Mishlei, Perek Vav, Pasach Vav, Ki Ba'ad Isha Zaina at Kikar Lechem, that because one did not wash for the Kikar Lechem, it's like he had relations with a Isha Zaina. So Rava says, 1 second. Hi Ba'ad Isha Zaina at Kikar Lechem, based on your drasha. At Kol Eicha Lechem B'lein Tila Sedayim, you had a relations, it's like having a relations with the Isha Zaina. So instead of saying, the Pasuk should have said, Ba'at kikar lechem ad Isha Zaina mibayle. The Pasuk should have said that because a person had the kikar lechem without netilas yadayim, it's like he had relations with the Isha Zaina. Rava says a new answer. That kolabal Isha Zaina, that somebody who's going to have relations with the Isha Zaina, the Seif Mevakish kikar lechem, eventually he's going to be so poor and he's going to have to ask for bread because of the sin of being mizana with the zayna. Reb Zrika says, Reb Elazar, another thing, called a mezalzel b'netilas yadayim, anybody who is mezalzel b'netilas yadayim. So then, like Rashi says, sha'oichel tamid b'lei netilas yadayim, he eats constantly without netilas yadayim. So what's going to happen is nekar min ha'olam, he's going to be uprooted from the world. Let's just look at Rashi. Why is nekar min ha'olam? The ever al divrei chachamim. Because he's over on the words of the Chachamim. What did the Chachamim say? The Chachamim said, Ufayritz Godar Yishichenu Nachash. That somebody who's over on Divrei Chachamim, so he deserves to die. Taisus right away asks, Teimeleri, that according to Rashi, who says that somebody who is Mezalzel L'Tilas Yadayim, he's going to Nekar Min Ha'olam, and according to Rashi, he's going to die. So Taisus brings, first of all, every divrei chachamim, if you're bringing the pasuk of ufeides gadei shechenu nachash, so anytime somebody's over on divrei chachamim, he should deserve to die. Vasepes netilas yadayim, and Taisus brings another gemara that it says that shloisha dvarim mevin as adam lidei that somebody is mezalzel in netilas yadayim, so the gemara says that he will get poor, not nekar min ha'olam b'misa. So Taisus goes in, and the Mefarshim go in a difference between somebody who's mezalzel once or somebody who's mezalzel constantly. Akaponim, let's learn Pasht like Rashi that call mezalzel metilas yadayim nekar min ha'olam. He's going to get misa because he was over on divrei chacham. Now the Gemara goes la halacha and different halachas on metilas yadayim. Reb Chia bar Ashi Rav mayim hadishenim. Mayim hadishenim. Rashi touches up shelifnei hamazon. The water that you use before you wash, before you actually go and sit in a meal. When a person washes his hands, he has to make sure to pick up his hands like this, upwards. And like Rashi explains, and the Gemara is going to explain, I'll read it and then I'll explain. When a person washes his hands before the meal, he has to pick up his hands upwards. When he washes the mayim achreinim, which is the water, like Rashi brings really two opinions. First, Rashi says it's mitzad melech shdeimis. It's because of the salt that a person, in the olden days, the salt was very strong, and we were very worried about it getting into your eyes, so they used to wash their hands afterwards. Then the next Rashi brings down mitzad because of zuamais. There's different, Mefarshim explain, is Rashi saying two reasons, there's a one reason, but let's learn Pashat Pshat. That when a person, he has to put it upwards, and the water after the meal, he has to bring his hands downwards. That when you wash your hands, you have to put your hands upwards. Because I'm worried that when you wash your hands, the first time, maybe the water is going to go past your joints. And what's going to happen is like this. Let's take not Lubavitch custom that we wash 3 times. The Veld, they wash 2 times. Why do they wash 2 times? The person's hands is tummy, so he washes once. That water is tummy. So what does he have to do? He has to have other water to take away the tumidic water. Now, the problem is, let's say, going to Shitas Rashi, that you have to wash till here. So now, you're going to wash, let's say, till here, and then some of the water is going to drip back over here, and then a few minutes later, that water will come back and be matam in your hands again. So you have to make sure that the water, not keep it downwards, that the water will, some of the water will come down from the hand and then go back into the hand, but rather what you should do is make sure that it goes upwards, and wash your hands again, because if some of the water goes back and your hand will keep upwards, then it will just dry over here. It won't go back into the hand to be metamed. Okay. Right there, Ravo says, anybody who's going to eat bread without washing without drying his hands. It's like he ate tamidike bread. Like it says, Hashem says, okay, before we learned, Rabbi Vida said, from the pasuk of Ki bi'ad isha zayna ad kikar lechem. So now, the Gemara brings the end of the pasuk. Like we said, this is a pasuk in Mishlei, Perek Vav, pasuk Chavav. I'll just read the whole pasuk. It says, Ki ba'ad isha zayna ad kikar lechem, ve'eshes ish nefesh yikara tatzut. So now, he says like this, Umay ve'eshes ish nefesh yikara tatzut. What does it mean that a married woman, the soul, the precious soul, will trap? Anybody who has gaiva, anybody who has arrogance, eventually he'll stumble with a married woman. Like it says, that because he was a yikara, because he was a balgaiva, that's why he's going to be nichshal with the eshes ish. So Rabbi says, based on this drasha, hi nefesh yikara, nefesh gavay mibayli. If nefesh yikara is mashma, it's a precious soul. If we're saying, based Rabbi Yechlan is saying that anybody who has gas zaruach, the b'seif nichshal be'eshes ish, because of the pasuk of nefesh yikara tatzud, so the pasuk should have said ve'eshes ish, nefesh gavaya tatzud, v'oid he tatzud mibayli. Also, if it's saying that the eshes ish is going to trap the man, so the pasuk is mashma that it's the nefesh, it's the gaiva that traps the person. And based on what Rabbi Yechlan is saying, it's mashma that it's the woman who traps the man. So Rabbi says the new pshata. Anybody who comes onto a married woman, even if he's going to read, he's going to learn Teda, which Teda, the Navi says, it's precious, which means learning Teda is precious even to the Eibishter, even more than a Kohen Gadol going into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippurim. Even if a person has the mile of Limud HaTeira, if a person is going to have relations with the Eshes Ish, with a married woman, he is going to be trapped and he's going to get Gehenim. Reb Chia Bar Abba said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, he used the expression Nefesh Yikara, which we said it's Gaiva. Now the Gemara is going to bring different notions, different expressions, how Gaiva is not a good thing. Anybody who has arrogance, it's like he served Aveda Zara. What's the raya? He says, it says in Mishlei, that Hashem despises somebody who's arrogant. It says in Dvarim Perek Zayin Pasuk Avav, it says, that you shouldn't bring any abomination to the house. So he uses the words Te'ava, which teaches us Te'ava, that anybody who's, what did it say, Kol Gva, that Hashem despises, Kol Gva Leiv. And it says Te'ava El Beisecha. It teaches us that anybody who is arrogant, it's like he's serving over the Zara. Rabbi Yechlan himself said, in other words, not in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that Kilu Kofar Beikar, anybody who has Gas Zaruach, it's like he denied Hashem. Shnamar, like it says, V'dom Levavecha, because you were arrogant, V'shachachtas Hashem Lekecha, you forgot about Hashem. Third opinion, Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina Omar, Kilu Ba Al Kol Aroyis, it's like somebody who had relations with all the Aroyis, all the people that are forbidden for him to marry. Why? What's the raya? It says over here, by somebody who's arrogant, Teyavas Hashem Kol Gva Leiv. And it says in regards to the sin of somebody, in the Torah says in Parshas Vayikra Yudches Chav Zayin, says that ki es kol ha'teva sakel. So it says Teva, which teaches us, which that speaks about the Arayis, that anybody who is Gva Leiv, which the Torah describes Tevas, he is also considered like he had relations with the Arayis. Ula Amar, fourth opinion, ki lebana bama. It's like he actually built a bama. Bama is a mizbeach for goyim, which the Torah forbids that. And somebody who does have arrogance, it's like he built the bama. Like it says, chidul lachem and adam asher neshama ba'apei, desist the person asher neshama ba'apei, which means his neshama is very high. Ki b'ameh nechshavu, what is he considered? So the Gemara says, al tikli b'ameh, don't read the b'ameh, what? Ela bama, rather a bama. Now, the pasuk said, that Yikara, we brought the pasuk of Yikara him mipninim, and then the pasuk says, sorry, we brought the pasuk of Teyavas Hashem Kol Gval Lev. Then the pasuk says Yod Liyod Lo Yinake. So now the Gemara says, my Yod Liyod Lo Yinake. What's the end of the pasuk? You're saying Teyavas Hashem Kol Gval Lev. That's somebody who's haughty. It's like he's served in the Zara. Okay, so what is Yod Liyod Lo Yinake? Hand to hand Lo Yinake. What does that mean? So Rav says Kol Abal Ishes Ish. It teaches us that somebody who has relations with the Ishes Ish. Even if he acquired, even if he was makna the entire world to Hashem, like Avram Avinu, it says the Ksiv Beit, it says by Avram Avinu, Harimaisi Yadi El Hashem El Elyon Kine Shemayim V'Aretz. In other words, he said Harimaisi, he gave the entire world to Hashem. Over there, the pasuk is being Mishabeach Avram Avinu, that he gave everything to Hashem, that he was makna everything to Hashem. However, even if a person has the status, he's like Avram Avinu, if he's going to be nichshal and ishes ish, lo yinakim in din shel gehenim, he will deserve gehenim, and nothing will get him out of it. Now, kashahu lebeit Rabbi Shila. The beit Rabbi Shila had a question on this. Hi, if you're saying he's like Avram Avinu, so yod li yod lo yinake. What's the expression by Avram Avinu? It says yod di mi boile. If you're saying like he's like Avram Avinu, what's the pasuk? It says Harimaisi Yadi. So use the same expression, Yadi. Elamar debate of Shila. Rather he changes pshat. Even if a person receives the Torah from the Eibishter like Moshe Rabbeinu, the Chesiv Beit says in Parshas Esabracha, Miminoi Eish Das Lomei. So what does Yod Liyod mean? That he mamish gets the from the Eibishter himself. The halach is, so what's going to happen is, he will not be saved from Gehenna. So Rabbi Yechna had a shaila on the Beit of Shila. Ha Yad Liyad, if you're saying that that's what Yad Liyad means, that he's receiving, that even if he received the Torah from Hashem, so what should have said? Yad mi baile. Should have said the hand from when he receives from Hashem. Allah Rabbi Yechna says, Daf Heyom and Aleph, Afilo is tzedakah b'seiser, even if he's going to do tzedakah quietly, which somebody who does tzedakah quietly, the Ksiv, it says matan b'seiser yichbe, as somebody who gives tzedakah quietly, it basically atones on the anger of Hashem. So it's a very high madrega giving tzedakah b'seiser. Nevertheless, lo yinakim medina shel Gehenim, you will not be saved from Gehenim.